Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing the astrology report for the week commencing the 10th of October. I'll be outlining some key aspects and transits taking place and giving you an overview of what it all means for us. Before I do that, I just want to clarify, as I always do, that the astrology doesn't control our lives. It merely gives us a framework to help us understand what is unfolding around us. It helps us to recognise the spiritual lessons that are taking place around us and the lessons we need to be learning at this time. But at the end of the day, it's ultimately up to each and every one of us to embrace the process, to go with the flow of what the energies are teaching us and actively seek out lessons to be learned so we can grow from them. But in and of themselves, the astrology transits don't force things to happen. They merely guide us in the direction that will optimise our growth and empower us the most going forwards. Now, in terms of the aspects this week, I'll begin with the moon as usual. Having just had the new moon in Libra setting new beginnings, this week the moon's in a waxing phase. It's all about the development of the intentions we set. So we begin with the moon in Libra, so this is about that need to connect with one another, to build harmony in our relationships and to make sure that whatever we're doing, we have a healthy relationship with ourselves so it forms a healthy underpinning to the relationship with others. The moon then moves into Scorpio on Wednesday itself, so this brings a focus on the deeper levels of situations. It's about going below the surface and illuminating the our deeper motivations for doing things, and it's also a time where we may find old emotional patterns surfacing, old hurts, in which case it's important that we be patient with ourselves. We don't project these issues onto other people. We recognise it as an opportunity to let go and make greater peace with ourselves. From Friday, the moon will move into Sagittarius. This is a time where it's about the emotional need to seek truth, to explore new ideas, and to just try to expand our perceptions somewhat through exploring new experiences and new ideas before the moon moves into Capricorn on Sunday. And this is the application of the ideas to see what manifests, what doesn't. But it's also a time for taking stock of our lives, for taking personal responsibility for how things are unfolding, and emotionally recognising how we're responsible for our own welfare, we're responsible for how our lives unfold, and making necessary changes so that we empower ourselves going forwards. Now, as I said before, because we've just had a new moon, some of us will feel the effects straight away if we're sensitive. For others, the sudden new creative energy may take a few days to kick in, but this is a time for making these changes in our lives, or trying to adjust the way we relate with one another. We have Mercury on Wednesday is going to be moving from Libra, so having a balanced intellect and recognising the importance of relationships as such. With Mercury moving into Scorpio, this brings a few weeks of the need for the psyche or the intellect to penetrate to the core of the matter. It's that intellectual need for truth and to understand the core essence of something and not just be happy with the surface level explanation. It's having that deep and penetrating mindset, that desire to know the core root of an issue and address it. And it's seeing the truth, valuing truth in our lives, if you like. And on the same day, Mercury's going to oppose Uranus, which is the higher octave of Mercury, i.e. Mercury is the lower mind, Uranus symbolises the higher mind. So this opposition, it represents, for some of us, if we reject one side of the equation, so if we have a tendency to think that everything has to be logical, everything has to be rational and operate according to the way the intellect works, we'll project the Uranian side, which is all about change, it's all about making radical transformation, and it's awakening to higher levels of truth which are more abstract and not necessarily as obviously applied in life as the daily thinking and the rational intellect would suggest. Or if we're someone who tends to obsess about change or deal more with the Uranus side of things, then we may insist on being unconventional or being random, chaotic and difficult to pin down. But if we utilise the natural harmony of the two, because as I said, Uranus is a higher level of Mercury. We can use the Scorpio energy that Mercury's in to purge any mental attachments from the lower mind or the rational intellect, and connect with the higher mind and recognise how we can learn the insights from the higher mind, take this wisdom in, and through Mercury identify practical ways to apply it. It's also about the ability to communicate these insights to other people. It's not enough to just know something. To truly make it of any use, or for it to have a humanitarian emphasis, which is Uranus's forte, we have to be able to communicate it, to convert abstract and powerful mental images into the world of form, or into the world of language, so that we can communicate it with others, so other people can understand it and apply it themselves if they don't already have the ability to do that. So it's an opportunity for us to transform the rational mind and align it with the higher insights, so that we then become a channel for those truths, but we can then explain it in simple terms so that other people can get it. And the day after, Juno is the goddess asteroid of relationships. So this is committed relationships, like soulmate relationships. She's turning retrograde. It's going to start in Gemini this week, but by the 21st, Juno moved back into Taurus, where she'll be retrograde in Taurus up until the 23rd December. This is the beginning of the retrograde, and it's a time of re-evaluating our most committed relationships, and it's also dealing with any fundamental fears or issues that we encounter in our closest relationships, whether they be our partners, whether they be friendships that go much deeper than a casual acquaintance. So there's history, if you like, between the two, and both people have so far shown commitment to one another. And it also deals with the relationship between a disciple and the teacher. But with Juno retrogrades, we're looking at re-evaluating whether the Juno ideals of honesty, fidelity and equality in relationships, are these qualities present in the relationships? Are they? And not only is it a case of, does the other person bring these to us or honour those needs within us, but also, are we honouring those needs in the other person? Are we being true to the other person? Are we loyal? Are we committed to the relationship and we don't betray their trust? Or are we someone who has a fear of relationships and has a tendency to betray the other person, or to, if we're having some kind of emotional issue, do we have a tendency to abandon the relationship as such, or abandon the needs of the other person and cause resentment and frustration to build up in the relationships until there's a blowout of some kind? I'll do another video on this, because Juno is a very complex goddess asteroid. There's a lot to it, and this is a longer retrograde than the Venus retrograde, but both retrogrades are happening simultaneously, so relationships of all kinds are under review, and Juno brings an extra emphasis to the committed relationships, whilst Venus is not just about partners, it's about friendships, it's about business partners, about pretty much any relationship other than with children, our siblings or parents. So basically any relationship with other people who aren't directly related by blood, if you like. This has been re-evaluated by Venus to make sure that we're actually being honoured in relationships, or that the other person treats us with respect and equality. Juno is more about the committed relationships. Do we have a foundation of equality and fidelity in the relationship, or are there infidelities taking place, or are there any fears of abandonment or fears of betrayal that undermine the health of the relationship? In which case, it's a time where these fears may come up. We need to evaluate them carefully. Are these genuine issues in the relationship? Are we subconsciously attracting them through obsessing over these fears and bringing them to reality? So overall, this week is very much about transforming the mind through letting go of old attachments and allowing insights from the higher minds to come through via intuition and show us what changes we need to be making in our lives and how our minds need to be renewed so that our minds don't end up getting filled with crap that distracts us or prevents us from learning anything new. And it's also a week where relationships are really under the spotlight and will continue to be so for the next few weeks. And Juno's really ramping up a gear when she turns retrograde and going deep into the core issues of our most committed relationships and weeding out any areas where issues around equality, fidelity, harmony and the need for union with one another is not being honoured in relationships. So relationships are a key arena this week, as is with the new moon having just occurred, having the courage to make the changes first within ourselves. So if we recognise that we have a problem with commitment, if we have a problem with fidelity, if we just have fears of a deep relationship because of the necessary ingredient of the destruction of the ego or the transformation of it, so it's no more about the relationships supporting the ego or strengthening it, it's about the diminishment of the ego so that it becomes a more soulful union. We need to address any fears around this, and we need to also address any fears of abandonment or betrayal. And if we feel that relationships don't honour who we are, if we feel that we're not valued or our value system needs to change, then this is another theme that will be unfolding. The more we tap into the insights and apply them, the more we can grow and the more our relationships can transform. But all transformation begins on the inside. So if we're not prepared to do the work on ourselves, how can we really ask other people to do it? Because they'd have the right to just turn around and say, well, you're not doing it, so why the hell should I change? So it's having that courage to recognise where we have issues around worth, where we have imbalances in relationships, and where we have fears about around relationships, or where we have deep-seated resentments where the relationship isn't fostering equality and mutuality in it, and having the courage to start addressing these changes. We're not necessarily making full-blown changes yet because the retrogrades are not over, neither one of them are at the midpoint yet, so this is more time for doing the review work of going within oneself and seeing where we need to make changes internally in order to foster changes externally in our relationships. Because if the relationship we have with ourselves isn't healthy, we're going to struggle to have a healthy relationship with another person. If we can transform our inner landscape, if we can learn to love ourselves unconditionally and set that as the benchmark for our relationships, i.e., is the relationship based on love or is it based on attachment and fear of being alone? If it's based on love and we honour one another, then relationships can go much deeper. They're based on a foundation of trust and we don't feel the need to manipulate one another. If we don't have these core foundations though, then relationships continue to be dysfunctional. But we can't force the other person to change. The only person we can actively change is ourselves. If we transform the issues internally, that then opens the doorway for transformation externally, but it's up to the person whether they're prepared to make the changes that they can sense have to be made, or if they stick hard, dig their heels in and try to keep things as they are because it's serving them as it is, but it's not necessarily serving us. And the more we do this inner work, the more we transform our shadow and the more we transform the relationship with ourselves, the more that transformation can spread outwards and transform our relationships for the better. And as well, the more we can transform our own minds and the way we perceive things through emptying the rational mind of preconceptions and how we think things should be, and allow insights from the higher mind show us how things can be changed in a way that actually achieves things in a much better way, whilst honouring ourselves and honouring the collective consciousness, so understanding that everything is interconnected, everything that we do has effect on the whole, and by operating from this higher level of consciousness, of always assessing the impact our actions can take on the whole, then we transform the way we take action, we transform the way we communicate with one another, and we seek to share messages that will help one another grow and transform, and help each other understand the consequences that take place if we do things only for our own gain at the expense of others. So I hope that's a useful guide for the astrology for the week. There's a lot to take on board, but as I said, the key areas for this week are transformation of relationships through reviewing the foundations of them, and primarily the relationship with ourselves, and healing that one if it's dysfunctional, so that the relationships we have with other people can transform and become healthy. And also dealing with issues around commitment and fears of abandonment or betrayal that we may be harbouring, whether from the current relationship that we have with people or for old ones. But the more we do this work, the more we can achieve healthy relationships with oneself and each other, and the happier and more empowered we become in the long run, because the relationships are based on trust, love, harmony, equality, rather than it being given, constantly trying to manipulate to get what we want. So I hope it's a useful guide for the week, maybe many insights and many blessings. Take care.